All right, after a wild weekend of college football, we have our fantastic guest on today. Coach, how do I say?
Joffrey.
You say Guifre as it looks. Okay, Guifre. Yeah, I want to make
Yeah, it's
sure I
pronounced
said it.
it's pronounced like the who is it? The king in Game of Thrones or the ballet in New York?
Got it.
Joffrey. So,
Got it. Coach has been at a lot of places from a coaching standpoint. Played football at Syracuse, was a lineman there. Is known as one of the best offensive line coaches in college football. Was with the Indianapolis Colts for quite a few years. Was with UConn. He was offensive coordinator there. Most recently was with Fordham, but he's been He's been at Maine. He's been at University of Miami. It's really a great privilege to have you on today, talking some football. Obviously, certainly a wild weekend in college football, and obviously, your career has spanned a long time. Talk a little bit about the career you've had over these years.
yeah, thank you for having me on, Dave and Derek. Um, I've known Derek forever. It seems like forever. It's been a long time, man. You was with him at Sacred Heart back in 2004, but my career, um, being born and raised in upstate New York in Canastota, a little onion town about 20 miles east of Syracuse. Um, Having the opportunity to play football at Syracuse, was there 90, 95 to 99. Um, and then coached high school football at Christian Brothers Academy. Shout out to CBA. They're in the state championship this week. CBA Syracuse versus CBA Albany. So one CBA team is going to win, which is cool. The dome's going to be flooded with purple and gold this weekend. Um, but yeah, went from CBA to University of Miami. I was there for three years. Um, GA'd my first year in 2001 on the defensive side of the ball for Randy Shannon, Greg Mark. Worked with the defensive line. Um, Learned a lot from those guys. Great guys. Great staff. Um, and then I moved over to offense after the year in January, and got 2 years with the guy who, in my opinion, is the best offensive line coach, the greatest offensive line coach in college football, Arthur Francis Kehoe, who Coach Key is phenomenal human, phenomenal coach. Just he had so much information to give, and just such a great person. So I feel blessed to be there. Um, yeah, I was at Miami, and then ended up at Sacred Heart for my first position job with Coach Gorham at Sacred Heart. Actually shared an office with Neil Brown. Neil and I shared an office. Um, and Myself, Coach Brown, Coach Acelta, who I worked with at Fordham, who's a dear friend and a hell of a football coach, but was at Sacred Heart for 3 years and then left. Went to University of Maine for 5 with Coach Cosgrove. I put Jack up there with my coaching Mount Rushmore. Just one of the greatest guys that I've been around on or off the field. Tremendous person, tremendous father, tremendous leader, tremendous, role model. I love Jack. Coach Cos is, he's a phenomenal person. But spent 5 years at Maine, and then went from Maine to Indianapolis Colts, as an offensive assistant with Coach Pagano. Was here with Chuck for 6 seasons, and then um, after we got let go in 2018, wound up at UConn my first year coaching the offensive line, and then the next 3 being O-line / offensive coordinator. Um, and then after leaving UConn, ended up taking a year off of football. Still stayed in the Connecticut area, uh, the South Windsor, Hartford area. Was there, and you know ended up at Fordham, and I was at Fordham for 2 years. So yeah, it's been a good coaching career. It starts off as, you're the young guy, and now, on the last staff, I'm sitting there scratching my head. It's like, now I'm the old guy on the staff myself, and Coach himself. Even though he got me by a couple years, you probably wouldn't know it, but no. But it's been good, and looking for the next opportunity.
College football is, it's funny that you say you're the old guy at what, 47?
Yeah.
Meaning that's how young college football coaching has become.
Yep.
That would have been, I would say 20 years ago, that would have been kind of middle of the road as far as coaches on the staff age wise. But it's changed. It's changed so much. Partially, and you could probably talk a little bit about this, but partially because what's expected of coaches now, time wise is so crazy. There's no time off. Very little time off, if any. You're probably still recruiting even in your time off. Talk a little bit about, and we saw a little bit about how some of the changes of college to college football are, I would say, directly affecting some of the behaviors because, without consequences in certain areas, you're going to start this. I'll use a quick example: Super Bowl. NFL. If you do something, for example, this weekend, the quarterback from Jacksonville gets hit. Whether you think it should have been a late hit or not a late hit, according to the rules of the NFL, it's a late hit and it's a flagrant. And the way that he hit him in the head, it gets him tossed out. He's probably going to have a hefty fine, so on and so forth, right? Well, college football doesn't. Yes, they fine the university, which
pennies.
We're talking about offline, $100K to the university. That's like, and they're making $1 billion. So it's but talk about some of the changes in college football, what's going on, and how it's affecting coaches.
Dave, and this is just strictly my opinion. You see it now. With the transfer portal, and we didn't deal much. When I was at UConn with NIL because it was in its infancy. Right, a few guys had some things, but there wasn't a lot. And we didn't really deal with it for them. But you see it right now. It's almost like you have to re-recruit your room every day. Back in the day, God, I sound like the old coach saying that back in the day.
I know. Don't you hate it? I hate it when I got to start like that, but that's what it is.
I feel like I'm going to stand up and dislocate a hip after saying something like that.
Back in the day now might be 5 years ago.
Yeah. But I remember when I played, like coaches you'd get your ass ripped, and you were expected. You got ripped, and it is what it is. Now, if you get after a kid, you've got to grab them and have a conversation with them, and I think that's good coaching. But it's like you've got to re-recruit your room every day to make sure that guys aren't leaving, to make sure that guys are happy, that you have a plan laid out for them, and how you're going to help develop and how you're going to help progress them and go from there. But, whenever this transfer portal opens here soon, I would expect this to be like the damn wild west. I think it's going to be nuts.
And the drop of so the roster's Division I going to 105, right? Even though people always look at the positive side of it, you can have 105 scholarships now. But the real effect is some of these rosters carrying loads and loads of walk-ons. You're going to shed 30 guys. I guess you're going to shed some seniors, but
because those COVID guys are now gone.
But you're going to shed an additional 20, 25 guys that would normally be on your roster, and those guys, even though they're walk-ons, are going to go somewhere. So more than likely, in a lot of cases, they're going to go to FCS or below and affect those rosters, which in the transfer, I don't remember what the number was transfer portal last year when it first got flooded, but I believe it was like 4,000 or 5,000, something like that total. Yeah, it's going to far exceed that. Yeah, because there's no way. There's just because guys are going to have to shed their roster. I mean, there's no way around it. So it's and probably some scholarship guys who aren't performing right are going to get shed there. So
You would think you
you
would
know,
think it probably hurt some of the walk-on guys as well.
right.
Oh hell yeah.
You've got some guys that have grown up loving a team, and all they've ever wanted to do was be a part of the program, and now they can't because there's not a spot for them. I think that's I think that'll hurt college football.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's part of the essence of it, right? Like that was always an appeal. Like, I always go back to, in reference Nebraska, right? Like they were like walk on you. And now, look at some of those guys. And if you're a walk on, that's maybe right on that fringe of hey, this guy's done everything we've asked. He's added, he's helped us in other ways, maybe not so much on the field, maybe off the field as a locker room guy. Those guys aren't getting those scholarships anymore. Absolutely not. I'm going to go grab somebody who's already played 2 years at Alabama and can come in and help me produce, because as the head coach, I got to win now, right? Like those moral victories, I think, are what's going to kind of take a back seat to I have to win now.
Yeah, I would agree with you wholeheartedly, Derek. I think it's going to make it's going to make some aspects of college football hard. I think, especially like I said, some of the walk-on guys that it's all they ever dreamed of, and having to go from 140-man roster down to 105. It's the trickle-down effect is going to be real. I really believe that.
Yeah, and the solutions there are. It's everything's moving so fast, and they're short on solutions, right? So it falls back on basically the coaches and the athletic departments of how they want to manage the football department, quote unquote, right? So like, how are you going to manage the football department between all the different things? Like you saw, I don't know if you saw, but Stanford did something. It's the first team to do this GM role in the way that they're doing it, where they're setting it up like the NFL, where the GM is above everybody, and including the coaches, and he's basically he's the CEO of football, without using that word.
Frank, you worked with, you had Luck was there when you were there, right?
He was. Like I said, I don't think it could happen to a better guy.
Right.
Oh yeah.
As smart as he is, and what a great person Andrew Luck is. Like people ask me all the time, like, who's your favorite quarterback? Like, that guy is special. Now, granted, Donovan McNabb is really, really special too, right? But Andrew Luck was, being around that guy, it was amazing. He's such a good person, such a good football mind, such a good player. If he didn't get hurt, I think he was a generational talent. But yeah, I think he'll do awesome for Stanford. I mean, you bring that guy in.
Oh God, yeah.
Come on.
It's amazing
for them. I'm so happy for him. I'm so happy for Stanford. Yeah, no, that's great. I'm excited for them.
It's a very it's an interesting move too, because that could alleviate coaches from some of these type of things that have, I'm talking about head coaches who are obviously run the program, and you're asking them to basically be nowadays at the highest level GMs as well as head coaches, and it could alleviate some of that stuff, including some of these kind of things that you have off the field, right? Like that could alleviate the head coach from having to be the bad guy in, a guy plants a flag, right, and cause a melee. Well, now the head coach is in a bind, right, because he has to go and, this might be a player he loves, maybe one of his best players, and he's got to figure out some sort of punishment for that person, or something he has to do. Whereas that kind of role with an Andrew Luck, he can bring them in and say, hey, listen, we already established this is one of the standard things, and here's the quote unquote punishment for this kind of stuff that's outside of football, right? Outside of what the coach is really dealing with. So I think some of those things that you see, like with Andrew Luck, obviously stand-up guy, played in the NFL, CEO like type individual. Father was running I think the college football playoff for a long time. So, comes from kind of a good management pedigree, so to speak. So you kind of get that kind of aspect. I think that's going to become. I think it ultimately will help the head coach because they still listen. Coaches' jobs, hired or fired, all it does is end up shifting from one person to another person. It's really, the athletic director and that GM are still going to have that conversation whether a guy gets hired or fired, and but it may create more of a buffer for the head coach in the long run, which I think could be a good thing because I think at the end of the day, most coaches want to go get great players, coach great kids, and help them improve. And some of the other stuff that's bogging them down is pushing some of the guys out of the game. You know what I mean? And that we don't want either, right? We don't want great coaches being pushed out of the game because they don't feel like they can manage some of the things that they never had to manage before. What are your thoughts on that kind of stuff?
No, I think you hit the nail right on the head. I think having that, whoever it is in that GM role, it's going to take an NFL feel, right? Like here's the standards. Here's what we've set forward as an organization, as a team, and if you're not living up to them, and you're not falling in line, here's the punishment. But I really do think that having somebody in that role will help. Will help the head coach, will help the assistant coaches, will help the recruiting coordinators and the player development people and the strength staff. I think having somebody that's been there, done that, is a really smart move, for college football. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's more schools that adapt this after, in the next coming weeks or months.
And I think I agree with you 100%. I think one of the other things that I just thought about that actually could come of it too, right? Just like in the NFL, if there's some issue with the program that is unrelated to what the coach is doing, you could fire that GM, all right? You could just like you do with the NFL. Picks aren't done properly, team isn't managed the way that the athletic director wants it to be managed, right? And they could always fire the GM as opposed to necessarily, which happens now. Sometimes things that happen, like you see flag planting, things like that, where there's a whole fight, that could cost a coach their job. Whereas now that could become more on the GM's role. Hey, coach, here's what we expect in the program. None of this stuff should happen, and that stuff starts to happen. Part of that is on the GM. So I think in the long run, it becomes you could say a necessary evil, but it really it may be a necessary thing. And who as a head coach wants to figure out when your team gets fined, like all right, what do I do here? Like the president of the university is upset with me because I got fined. The athletic director is upset with me because I got the school fined $100,000. Like, who do I go talk to?
Right, which is also, Dave, it's why I think you see some of these head coaches not like getting involved in it, right? Like you saw Ryan Day kind of just stand around and kind of watch this whole thing happen while, some of the lower level guys on the field are the ones in there getting pepper sprayed and mixing it up to try and get their guys back. And then, like we talked a little earlier this morning, like then you see a Steve Sarkisian at Texas who runs right over to the middle of the field and tell like, hey, we're not doing this at Texas A&M. Like this ain't happening. My guys get off the field, right? Like, so you see some of those guys that might be, quote, on the hot seat, maybe don't want to get it mixed up in all of that stuff, even though ultimately like it's going to fall on them as the head coach. It's a really, sticky type situation to kind of be involved in.
Yeah, I would expect, college football to address this similar to how the NFL does after, here's the points of emphasis that happen during the course of the week. They send out the tape every week in the NFL, and things are addressed. I expect this to be addressed in college football, and I would bet that there's going to be either fines or suspensions brought forth if that happens again.
Absolutely.
I think it's
Definitely. And you see that across the board. The NFL is slowly, and we talk about this all the time, how college football is becoming more like the NFL and more of a business standard. And, if you want to start to pay your athletes, here's the quote unquote code of conduct that you're going to be held to as a football player, not just a student athlete, where the school is going to tell us how to handle this. We are now going to handle this as the football team, because this is, where you're getting paid or where the money's coming from. All of those things are going to start to trickle down. And ultimately, to me, the NCAA needs to take more ownership of these things rather than just sit back and let each school individually handle it, especially if, with the NIL and the money all coming into it, they need to have more say in what this does. Just like the NFL handles all of their things, that's how the NCAA needs to operate. Otherwise, it's going to continue to be the Wild West. It's going to continue to everybody's going to do what they're going to do, and and you're going to have results like you had this weekend.
Right. No, I agree with you. I agree. Get it out of the sport. It's such an awesome game.
Yep.
Right? Stuff that's not needed. But trust me, I get it. People are fired up and they're in a moment, and emotions. You let emotions rule.
Absolutely. Well, let's shift gears. Let's talk a little offensive line play. Obviously you played offensive line, you coached it for a long time, and you've been OC as well. On the offensive line, kind of, one of the things I noticed is that, you have in college, the NFL is different because you have your specialized guys, and then you have a couple of guys that are also like they've got to be able to play every position.
Right.
What are some of the things that you're seeing in offensive line that are changing, and how guys are recruiting offensive linemen versus maybe, I don't know, even 10 years ago?
Well, I think information doubles. I heard Buddy Morris speak on this. Information doubles in this country, every, 18 to 24 months, because of the internet and because of, access that people have. And I think offensive line play, you've got so many different schools of, what your offensive line tree is, like who you learn from, and who is the person that you learned from, who did he learn from, and there's different ways to go about it. I think there's different techniques, there's different ways to teach. In my online manual, page 1 says 5 + 4 = 9, but so does 6 + 3. Right? I think there's different ways to do things. There's different ways to to teach a drive block, a down block, a pass set, a kick slide, a wide zone reach block, but I think the core things will always stay the same. I think you want tough guys. I think you want guys that fight and compete and stay on their feet. You want guys that are physical. You want guys that are athletic. Everybody wants these. They want badasses up front. In terms of trying to recruit these guys, I think there's a few schools of thought. Do you take the bigger, tight ends that you can sort of develop into offensive tackles? Do you take a really, really big kid, maybe a bigger high school kid that may have to, you may have to melt, 30, 40 pounds off them? Do you take a guy like that and chain him to the squat rack and feed him nothing but, ribeyes, and have him do back squats and box squats and, jump squats and get them explosive and get them ready to play? I think each team and what they do offensively, are they a zone team? Are they a gaps scheme team? Are they an up-tempo team? Are they're going to play out of a huddle? I think, you sort of try to find a mold, or you sort of try to find people that fit your scheme. But I think at the end of the day, I want guys that are smart. I want guys that are tough. I want guys that will compete. I want guys that'll play for 7 seconds. You know, you can't win with choir boys all the time.
No,
And I
there's no
want
doubt about it.
guys that are a little, that are a little tapped every once in a while, right? They can,
Yeah.
You got to tell them to stop rather than speed up. You got to give them
Absolutely.
well, slow down rather than, hey, let's go. But
Right.
Well, that's the defensive line.
Have you seen a change in that, Coach? Have you seen a change in the mindset of an offensive lineman since everybody has gone to, I hate to use the word finesse, but more of the spread offenses and things like that? Do you see yourself having to tell those guys to kind of go rather than pull back later as you've progressed in your career?
I think early on, there were, when you didn't have, the Twitters or the huddle and you everything was VHS tapes, trying to figure out what type of player you had through, either seeing them at a camp or having a conversation with them on the phone, I think was a little harder than what it is now. Right now, you can pull up film, you can watch a guy in the weight room, you can watch a guy, with his individual coach, working on techniques, or you see him, at a wrestling match or, playing basketball, and you see, some of the skills carry over. I think you can find, really, really tough kids, and, it's recruiting, as you guys know, is not an exact art. You're gonna miss every once in a while, but at least if you do miss on a kid who's a great person, may not have the skill, but who's a great person and not gonna be a distraction on or off the field. But I don't know. We my years at Miami, we were able to find some really, really good players. Really, really offensive linemen. You'd find them up north. You'd find them in the middle of the country. And when I was at Maine, we made our living on, shorter. I don't want to say a little less athletic kids, but I had 2 guys that played for me, and I was there, Chris Holly and Garrett Williamson. That if they were 6'3" to 6'5", they would have been at Rutgers. They would have been at a Syracuse. They would have been at, they would have been someplace else. But, they played for me, and they were as tough and as nasty as they come. And, there was also a kid from Rochester, New York, Bruce Johnson, who, was a center, and, Pitt had dropped him. And, I found him at Gates Chili High School and scooped him up, and, he played for me for a year, and then when I left, played for Coach Ambrosi at Maine, and Jeff turned him in. He won the Remington Award, and bounced around the NFL for a few years as a center. Now he's coaching high school ball, and got a good business. I think he's in real estate or he's doing something in Rochester. But you find kids like that just tough ass kids that love to grind and love football, and guys you don't have to worry about doing anything, to shine a negative light on their name or your name outside the field.
What's the difference between how you kind of have to go about recruiting Division I offensive linemen versus FCS offensive linemen? Because I feel like that's the biggest. Like if you were to look at what offensive linemen look like at Division I versus maybe FCS. I think that might be like the biggest position where you see the biggest difference. Probably D-line too, offensive line, defensive line. And then, because skill-wise, a lot of the guys still kind of look the same. They just may not be quite as good or as fast or whatever. Well, but linemen at those levels. So what are kind of the different things that you kind of have to do between those different levels for what you're looking for?
I mean, I think if you're at you're at a Power 4 team, you're at a, pick one, Ohio State, Michigan, you're getting the ready-made kids. You're getting, the creme de la creme at your position. You're able to go into the transfer portal and, pull a guy who may have been in Iowa or in Alabama and is looking to come in and play right away. When we were at UConn, you didn't have the ready-made kids. You had guys, like you had a kid like Chase Lunt, for example, who's their right tackle now, and shout out to Chase, man. I'm so excited for him, and the other tackle, Darlington Sen, their left tackle. Those two guys, recruited both of them. But you took a kid like Chase, who was a converted tight end in high school and really didn't play offensive line. He had a couple practices, when Corey Edsel was down at Arlington Martin High School watching spring ball, and he was, he just had him dry block, and he was watching him an individual. You get a kid like that, and it's like, okay, he's really never played offensive line, doesn't know how to pass set, which is fine. That's what they pay me for, to teach him, to be able to do that. But he's just got all the intangibles. He's long, he's lean, he's got to get in the weight room. He's got to be a guy you're gonna want to chain to a squat rack. But you look at him now, and I think he just got a Senior Bowl invite, and just made all New England, and shout out to him, man. He's worked his ass off, and you get those guys that are going to take a couple years to mature and grow, and have to develop in the weight room. But once you do, man, they're going to bust their ass for you and work really, really hard. But you look at FCS, 1AA to Division I, 1AA guys, you're not fine. You don't have that ready-made kid. You've got some. There's always going to be an issue. There's always not really an issue. There's always a reason why he's there. Maybe his foot speed's a little, lacking. Maybe, his strength coming off the ball isn't where it needs to be. Maybe he's tight. Maybe, he's got poor flexibility. Maybe he hasn't been coached. Maybe he's still proud eagle blocking like this, but I think that's the biggest thing. I think you need to try to find guys that fit your system. Try to find guys that are what you're looking for. Like, are you somebody that wants, do you value length and athleticism, or do you want, somebody who will fight you in a phone booth and be a tough ass? And then you go ahead and try to develop them and then play to your strengths.
Absolutely. I always used to see there's two philosophies with FCS. Either you get these guys that are tall and you try to put weight on them, or you get the guys who really were dominant in high school, but they were just an inch or two short or whatever. And you say, I'll take this guy who's like already ready to go. I mean, I guess it depends on the position too, right? Guards and centers, you could probably do that, and tackles you probably can't, because you need some length. You may be better off with a guy that you're taking a shot on. I remember when I was at UConn in the 90s, I don't know if you know this name, but he eventually left college football. But Steve Robichaud used to take all these shots at gigantic, tall guys that were exactly what you said, either tight ends or they were literally like hoop players. So we had 6'8", 6'9", 6'7", as tackles. But when they came in there, they weighed 220, and all of a sudden in a year they were 350. I don't know how he did it, but they were 350. Now this was the 90s, so guys the guys that gained weight in the 90s very, very fast, probably from methods that are probably were outlawed back then, but nobody checked as much.
Jerry Martin was there when you were there, correct?
Oh, he's of course. He was the
greatest. One of the best.
The best.
One of the best. So that's how they
did Jerry pass away when you were still at UConn, or?
Yeah. Everybody, all the guys that I had, some of the guys that were there, and even some of the guys I was with when I was, at Indianapolis, Donald Thomas and some of those guys, Darius Butler, they all spoke highly about Jerry Martin.
And he was great in particular, you're right, with linemen, because I think he was a defensive lineman himself. And so he understood, and he played at Syracuse, as I believe. Jerry played. But yeah, I think he really understood that too, especially with the lineman gaining size, and he was also always doing that with the basketball players. They were taking these literally beanpole kids that would come in, and all of a sudden they would be jacked, and strong. So, but yeah, Jerry was a legend. He was an absolute legend. He was a legend before I got there. He was already like literally. I mean, he was a legendary guy. I want to say he must have started there. I mean, like right out of college. Like there wasn't probably many strength and conditioning coaches back when he started, like in the 80s there. So. But it's yeah, there's no doubt that's a huge thing on it. You talked about,
and Coach, I always remember you being highly involved in that too. When we were at Sacred Heart, you kind of took that bull by the horns as well and kind of revamped our strength and conditioning, the off the field work, you know what I mean? The out of quote in season stuff. Where did you kind of get that side of your game from, like in terms of coaching? Was that something that you kind of engulfed yourself in from college or when you started at Miami? Because I know you were always very, very, very hands-on with our strength and conditioning.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, Jared. The whole thing with me is when I was growing up, my dad was a football coach, wrestling coach, and we had our own produce business, but he always had weights. When we moved into the house that I grew up in, he told me, like, you got one or two options. I'll either get you a snowmobile or a four-wheeler, or I'm going to buy you a squat rack in the basement. And I said, I'll take the squat rack. I don't need a four-wheeler. So being involved with strength conditioning and lifting was always something that I enjoyed. I really wanted to be a strength coach when I got to Syracuse. And I had worked with our strength conditioning coach, Syracuse, when I was done. When I was coaching high school football, he had a training center in upstate New York, and I went and got my club coach certification to teach the Olympic lifts, and I was working on getting my CSCS. But doing that, was something that I always loved to do. And when I was a GA at Miami, I would go in early. When I got there in the summer, in May and in June, if I wanted to work out, I had to be there early. So I would go in morning at 5:30 with Coach Swayze, the strength coach, who is now funny that you say that. He's now my son's strength conditioning coach at Christopher Columbus High School in Miami.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So I would go in early to work out, but then I would just sit there and help clean up some of the stuff in the weight room and get to see how he went about his business, how he trained his guys, and I would always just take notes and try to learn a little bit from him, even though I was the football GA. And then when I got to Sacred Heart, Coach Nofree at the time had said, like, would you like to help, Coach Gary Rio, who is now passed, who was a great guy. Who
God rest his soul. That's a godfather of Sacred Heart football.
Yeah, would you want to help him? And Coach Gorham let me, and sort of did that. So yeah, that's where I got it from, and I always enjoyed doing that. And, something I'd like to get back into. I got to get back into the weight room myself, but
yeah, don't we all?
But
yeah, strength and conditioning is a huge part of obviously the success of for linemen.
Dave was a big track guy. He had his own facility for a long time, right? So Dave, we always that's part of how we always ask guys. I mean, look, we just had Nick Soto, who's the new strength and conditioning coach for Miami baseball. We just had him on Friday, and we were talking to him a little bit about some things of that nature. It's just that has evolved within the game itself. I mean, now you're seeing guys spend or pay, those salaries for strength and conditioning coaches are just as much as position coaches now. I mean, because they spend so much of the time with those guys at that level. I mean, you spend more time with those guys than you do your position coach, because of the rules and the limitations and whatnot. If you're all not aligned, it's just it ain't gonna work.
Yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly.
Yes, speed is becoming the thing that now people are purposely, specifically addressing within the strength conditioning program, even though it's kind of obviously been a part of it, but the way that a lot of and we've had a lot of these guys on, like Tony Holler and even Soto is doing it with Miami
baseball guys.
with baseball guys. So But
First
the way
thing he said is, "I'm a football guy," right? Like, hey, I'm a football guy. Like, we're like, all right, okay.
yeah, they're addressing speed specifically and how you develop it, because it's becoming such a gigantic difference maker at the skill position, and obviously even like O line versus D line, right? Like that's the first battle that has to be won before anything else can happen. So,
Right.
but yeah, absolutely. So before I let you go, I wanted to ask about scheme and the run game. So
Sure.
the run game is becoming so kind of the evolution of everything, right? The spread was a huge deal. It's everybody's trying to run some version of air raid or Mike Leach's system or incorporating it here and there, and it skyrocketed. Zone read and all that kind of stuff skyrocketed, spreading people out. Defenses then got a lot more faster guys on the field, which then is starting to make a matchup issue even for offenses, because if they're able to counter the offenses, and now you're seeing teams that are able to run the ball effectively, although there are exceptions, but teams that are able to run the ball effectively um, uh, are really having a huge advantage in the NFL and college football, right? And you have to have that as a staple, as a part of your games. And it doesn't affect maybe your games when you're better than the other team for the most part. That's usually, but when both teams are pretty close, you're seeing that a team that's really just going to chuck it around and don't have the ability to like eat up some clock when necessary, or get the 1 or 2 yards that they need to, it's becoming a real problem. You see it in the NFL. Like it's becoming a problem. And the teams that do are winning these games. And sometimes you look at the Lions, for example, some of these games are overly lopsided because of their effectiveness in that run game. Talk about how important the run game is. And obviously as an offensive line coach, how you're able to counter someone who all of a sudden has a lot of speed and a little smaller guys on the field with really good run game.
Well, I mean, I think it goes back to, you hear coaches preach, run the ball, stop the run. That's right now, that's football. Yeah, you look at it, Dave, I think you have to be able to, you've got to be able to run the ball when you have to, and you've got to be able to run the ball when you need to. And, being able to do that, like you said, takes time off the clock, right? The OC that we had here, in my time with the Colts would always say, right, we're going to go grind meat, right? It's body blows in boxing, right? It may be a 2-yard game, maybe a 3-yard game, may not gain a yard, but we're softening up the defense. It's going to be a body blow. And I think that's, how you look at it. You have to look at it, right? You've got to put yourself in the positions to be able to, get your big guys up front to play fast off the football, to work in tandem with each other, be able to get pad under pad, and try to reset the line of scrimmage. Now it's really, really hard in the NFL, to do that because those D linemen are so, unbelievably athletic and strong and physical. And, you watch Buffalo last night. I don't know how many snaps they had, but they had 6 linemen in there.
Yeah.
Like, that's like O-line porn. That gets you excited when you see stuff like that. Like, here we go. We got 6 guys. We took a receiver off the field. Now we're going to try to smash somebody in the face repetitively. Okay, I'm going to stay up and watch this game. But I think by doing that and by adjusting your scheme, right? Are you a tight zone team? Are you a wide zone team? Are you zone read? Are you a gap scheme team? Do you like running God's play duo? Like what are you going to do? Are you going to try to go the Alex Gibbs route and just be a wide zone team, or are you going to try to sprinkle a little bit of everything? Add some insert, add some zone read, add some 2x2 or 3x1 open formation runs, and try to get a better number in the box, which what a lot of these teams are trying to do. Everything's based on box count, for your run game, with the spread teams. But yeah, I think football is, football circular, right? Everything comes full circle. I think you'll see a resurgence of the run game, especially like what you said, what you see Detroit doing. Detroit is, they're kicking people's butts right now with that wide zone insert scheme that they're running. That the one guy on Twitter, I think Dan Casey, was talking about and showed
Yep.
some clips of. I think they're doing a great job with that, and they're just so damn physical up front, and they play hard. And Hank Fraley's a hell of a coach, and he's got some dudes up front, and they're I love watching those guys. But
I think you started to see it a little bit last year with Michigan, right? Like Michigan kind of brought that I'm going to punch you in the mouth type of attitude, and then obviously had a lot of success winning the national championship. And Dave and I have talked about this a bunch. Like, guys were now recruiting defenses to stop the spread, and trickling down with that. High school, you don't bang as much as you do anymore in practice. Tackling is not what it used to be. The physicality has somewhat been taken out of the game. Now you start to pack that box, and you've got a bunch of tweeners out there on defense that are okay at tackling, but what it used to be at tackling, you can start to do some things. And that's coming from a spread guy in myself that was 4 wide in high school every play, but we sure as hell had 1,000-yard rusher every year. And that's just kind of part of it at the end of the day. If you can line up, control the clock, and smash somebody in the face, especially in high school, when putting together drives, it's a lot more difficult to put together drives when you're asking a guy to throw for a first down than it is to just turn around, hand the ball off, and kind of go. And also, I think positionally, everybody started out as a running back, right? So that innate, I know how to run the ball type of feel, even if they're not doing the specifics of what the position is asking, guys know how to run the ball a lot more so than run routes or do any of those things, even with, the whole emphasis on spread and receiver play and throwing the ball. That run game is still ultimately what's going to win. And you being a Northeast guy, Coach, you understand, like, playoff time, when that weather gets cold, shit, we're going to line up, we're going to control the clock, and we're going to smash your face. Like, that's just how you win a game.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think you have to be able to run the football. However you do it, whether it's, out of condensed formations, whether it's out of open formation, however you do it, you've got to be able to run the ball. Got to be able to establish that. I think there's Dave was saying earlier, there's a mentality behind it. There's a mentality behind, running the ball and, not letting the defense be able to stop you. And, I think that's the beauty of football. I really do.
No doubt about it. If there's not a 2 to 3 linebackers with a cowboy collar, they ain't tackling enough guys.
That's it, buddy.
That's all I say. It's like, as an old linebacker, I mean, if you're not tackling it up, if they don't have cowboy collars, they ain't tackling nobody.
Especially when it's cold out. Not when it's cold out. Nobody wants that contact.
None of those guys got cowboy collars anymore, the linebackers, because they're all speed guys for the most part.
They're all standing up, worried about if I'm going to get an interception.
Maybe the middle linebacker is a dog inside, but.
And then you want to try to scheme it to where, they're getting their fit from, people who are, you would call them the worst tacklers on the field, the corners.
Right.
Yeah.
Try to get everybody blocked up, but involve that, one of the corners somehow, some way in the run fit. And, after a few plays, he may turn it down and not want to tackle.
Yep.
I think Andy Kolanecki at Penn State does a great job. When you watch him, you'll see him this weekend in the Big Ten championship game. I think he'll scheme some stuff up against Oregon to make those corners have to come down and play in the fit and have to tackle. And they may, I don't know, we'll see. But
yeah, I mean, and look, and even like
coaching.
Yeah, and I think like even when you're trying to scheme that up, like. Those outside linebackers are pseudo strong safeties now, right? They're more of those skill, like I said, tweener type guys. You're worried about 4 verticals. Can he cover a guy down the chute? Like those guys ain't worried about, hey, I got to set an edge here once this guy down blocks, and now I got, a kick out coming from a guard or a tackle or a center or even an H-back now, like coming at your face. Like, look, there ain't many guys that want to play that game and over and over and over anyway. They might do it for a play or two, but a lot more nickel dime packages, all of those kind of light guys, lighter in the ass. It's just different. It's different, right? And that's why the spread game worked for a while, right? It was like, oh, that's a linebacker out there. He ain't going to be able to drop hook curl. Right. We'll get a guy sneak him behind, or, we can run this mesh concept where this guy ain't running with him. And it's all, look, it's just, like you said, football is circular. Everything comes back around. But for a guy that really enjoyed the physicality part of the game on the defensive side of the ball and offensive side of the ball, I get excited about this stuff, right? It's because now we're starting to see what I grew up watching football was. And at the end of the day, it's still a physical contact game where sometimes you just gotta, hey, this might not be the right call, but we're lining up and we're coming right in your face. I don't care if you know it, and that's what it's going to be. I'm going to impose my will, and that's going to get us what we need to do. And I think you're starting to see a little bit of that come back, and I think you talk about the Lions, it's a trickle down effect from their head coach. Like, he was a attached tight end in the league, as much of a offensive, as close to an offensive lineman at tight end as you could get, right? And his mentality of that game, of how he, played the game, and now how he coaches it. And I think for a city like Detroit, it's like the perfect match.
I would agree with that. I would agree wholeheartedly.
No doubt about it. Well, Coach, it's been phenomenal having you on. We take the opportunity while we can to have you on, an expert like yourself.
Before he gets back into it, man, and he'll be all and he'll be in it, and then we'll just be looking for where he's at, and then all those things. So, Coach, thank you, man. I appreciate it. I have a personal relationship and whatnot, and appreciate everything you've done and stayed in contact through all these years and whatnot. And I know you'll find the next great thing and do great there. And, fortunate enough to have, guys that can play for you, that, it affects them not only on the field with wins and losses and stuff, but everything off the field, Coach. So I appreciate you taking the time, buddy.
Well, Derek, you got me for life, man. I appreciate you. I remember him as a wide-eyed freshman walking on Sacred Heart's field with, his eyes were gigantic, and no, it was great. And, like you said, we've stayed in touch, and, he's a special guy. And, if I ever get the chance to be a head job, he'll be the first guy I hire. But I appreciate you guys. If I can do anything, if you ever need anything, I'm a phone call away. I'm here. I enjoy getting out and just talking football. That's the one thing, that you do this for long enough, once you get out of it, you miss the camaraderie, you miss the, just guys sitting around, talking ball. But I appreciate you guys, and, for everything that you guys are doing for, sports in the Northeast, and, helping, some of these kids, in their recruiting process. And, I'm going to sit here and say thank you. It means a lot to us as coaches. And, like I said, if you need anything, if I can ever do anything, give me a call. I'm here. You know how to get in touch with me.
Appreciate it, Coach.
All right.
Thank
I appreciate
Coach.
it. Enjoy and talk soon.
All right, buddy.
All right.
Bye.
We'll see you.
Bye-bye.
Good stuff.
That was phenomenal. That was great, man. Let's get up off this podcast. That was a great start to the week. Now, you said tomorrow and then Friday, right?
We got tomorrow, and then when's DJ coming on?
Was supposed to be when? Is that what I said? Wednesday.
So tomorrow.
So that's probably gonna be 11 or.
Oh yeah, that's fine. Tomorrow we have Coach Thompson from East Mississippi JUCO, then we'll have DJ, and then Friday we got state championship winning Group 1, Glassboro High School. Timmy Breaker head coach coming on. So get to talk to him and figure out how the hell he had a running back rush for 401 yards in one game. So let's go.
Yes, he definitely was. That's someone who understands the run game.
Also, coaches every game with no sleeves. So I'm interested. He looks pretty damn good on that sideline, but like out there, like good stuff. But yeah, we're gonna have a good week.
Awesome. All right. Until tomorrow.